Leon, I'm just asking for fair compensation. A 10% raise.
10%? Your time has passed many years ago.
At 50. I thought I had grown immune to humiliation until Leon Mercer laughed so hard the glass walls of his corner office seemed to vibrate. It happened the moment I finished my sentence. The one I had practiced all weekend. I'd like to request a 10% raise. His laughter didn't sound human. It sounded like metal scraping against metal, sharp enough to slice through the air and land squarely in the center of my chest. 10%, he repeated, wiping the corner of his eye like I had told a joke. Then the real cut came smooth, practiced, cruel. Ethan, you're 50. Your time passed years ago. Moments like that have a way of freezing time, don't they? If this scene reminds you of anything from your own life, let me know where you're watching from. And if you want to follow the rest of this journey, feel free to subscribe. Your support truly keeps our team creating these stories. For a moment, the room tilted. I felt heat crawl up my neck but couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His laughter bounced around the office, multiplying, echoing, settling into my bones like cold water. I had faced system failures, overnight crises, and 3 consecutive holiday rushes at BrightMart Retail Technologies, but nothing prepared me for being reduced to a punchline by a man young enough to still confuse arrogance for leadership. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. I've led every major systems upgrade for 12 years. Leon waved his hand. Already bored? Sure, but the board barely knows your name. That's just how it works. Just how it works. 12 years summed up, dismissed, erased. Something inside me cracked then. Not loudly, more like the soft, precise sound of a hairline fracture spreading across glass. I gathered my portfolio with hands that didn't feel connected to my body. My legs carried me toward the door on autopilot, the way they had carried me through every late night and emergency rollout. But just before leaving, something in the trash bin beside the door caught my eye. A corner of a document, familiar formatting, folded exactly the way I'd handed it to him. I bent down. It was my latest system report, 60 pages of analysis, solutions, and improvements I had labored over for weeks. The seal was unbroken, the pages still perfectly aligned. He had never opened it, not this one, not the one before it, maybe not any of them for the last 7 years. And in that moment, staring at my untouched work lying crumpled among energy drink cans and snack wrappers, I understood the truth. 12 years of loyalty had died in a trash bin long before I ever walked into that office, by the time I made it back to my desk. The office felt like a half-abandoned train station, quiet, hollow, and full of echoes that didn't belong to me anymore. I sat down in front of my lukewarm coffee. The surface filmed over. The way hours of disappointment tend to settle when no one is watching. Only 3 people remained. They sat scattered across the room, typing slowly, each of them wearing the same drained expression I felt tightening inside my chest. 12 years here. And this corner of BrightMart Retail Technologies had shrunk from a bustling operations hub to a graveyard of forgotten talent. I lifted the cup, tasted bitterness, and wondered if it was the coffee or me that had gone cold first, staring at my monitor. A memory surfaced uninvited the night my daughter graduated high school. I'd promised her I'd be there, promised I wouldn't let work swallow another milestone. Then a server collapsed, alarms screamed, and Leon's late-night email carried just 2 words. Fix it. I missed her speech, her smile, her moment, all for a company that would never miss me. That memory always returned when I least wanted it, trailing behind me like a warning I refused to hear. Yet, here I was, sitting in the dim quiet of a department emptied by cost optimization, clutching loyalty that no longer had a home. I opened the internal documentation folder, expecting routine updates, maybe a few revisions. What I found instead scraped something raw inside me. Every system I had built, 12 years of architecture, upgrades, emergency patches, and sleepless nights was now attributed to a group called Innovation Team, a team that didn't exist, a team that was apparently far more photogenic for company newsletters than one 50-year-old guy who kept everything running. My name wasn't missing by accident. It had been erased with intention, precision, and convenience. I stared at the screen, jaw locked so tightly it hurt. I remembered the moment Leon introduced that innovation team during a quarterly meeting, praising their creativity while I sat 3 rows back, clapping like everyone else because that's what professionals do. I told myself it was harmless branding, but now, seeing my work stripped of identity, the joke suddenly wasn't funny anymore. Suspicion prickled. I dug deeper, pulling up the earliest version of the system's architecture, the backbone of BrightMart's retail operations. And there it was, the original code signatures, development logs, and timestamps from my own laptop, all labeled under personal projects. Not company property, not covered by any acquisition. Work I built alone, on weekends, believing someday the effort would matter. That discovery didn't feel triumphant. It felt like betrayal wearing my own handwriting. 12 years of silence suddenly made sense, settling in my chest with the weight of something I should have seen sooner. And for the first time, disappointment burned hotter than loyalty in my life, when the frustration finally settled into something quieter. I pushed my chair back and forced myself to breathe. Anger wouldn't help me now. Clarity would. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk, the one no one ever touched, and pulled out the old notebook I had kept since 2012. Its edges were frayed, the cover bent, and several pages were smudged from late-night coffee stains. But inside, every idea I ever built lived in careful ink. I flipped to the earliest entries, the ones written in tiny handwriting because I could barely afford decent notebooks back then. Line after line. There it was, the architecture that became BrightMart's retail backbone. Predictive inventory logic, error tracking modules, diagnostic scripts, all of it developed at my kitchen table, long before the company decided my work was brandable. And every timestamp, every signature, every diagram proved it was created on personal time, with personal equipment, funded by personal sacrifice. The irony would have made me laugh if it didn't sting. BrightMart had erased my name from their documents, but they had forgotten one thing. History remembers the one who built the foundation, not the one who slapped a label on it afterward. As I turned another page, a printed email slipped out. I recognized it instantly. Years ago, I had asked Leon directly whether the company wanted to formally acquire the system I developed. I even outlined fair terms. His reply was still attached, short enough to fit in a shrug. Just use it. We'll sort it out later. Later, apparently, meant never. For the first time in 12 years, the situation felt less like a dead end and more like a door one I had never dared to open. My pulse steadied. Maybe losing everything I thought I had was the only way to finally see what I actually possessed. On impulse, I opened my contacts list and scrolled to a number I had saved years ago but never used. Nordbridge Commerce Systems. Their CTO, Ryan Caldwell, had reached out more than once, usually after BrightMart announced a breakthrough that suspiciously matched something from my notebook. I hesitated only a second before tapping call. Ethan Ward. The voice on the other end sounded almost relieved. "I've been hoping you'd reach out. I'm considering a transition," I said carefully, "but I need to know what you're actually looking for." Ryan didn't pause. "Your mind, your system, your signature." And to be clear, his tone softened slightly. "We've been waiting for you to leave BrightMart since 2019. I sat back, stunned. 5 years. They had tracked my work for 5 years. For the first time all week, something warm flickered in my chest. Not anger, not bitterness, but hope. Real hope, the kind that whispered, maybe your story isn't ending, maybe it's finally beginning. I arrived at the restaurant a few minutes early, mostly because I didn't trust myself not to back out. The place was the kind of upscale spot where the lighting was warm. The waiters moved like ghosts, and the cheapest entree cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I felt out of place walking in with my old laptop bag slung over my shoulder. But when Ryan Caldwell spotted me, he stood up immediately, smiling like I was someone he'd waited years to meet. "Ethan," he said, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "Thank you for coming." The sincerity in his voice softened something tight inside me. After 12 years of being treated like background machinery, it felt strange and surprisingly comforting to be greeted as if I mattered. We sat, ordered water, and before I could rehearse the cautious speech I'd prepared, Ryan leaned forward. "Let me get straight to the point. We want you at Nordbridge, and we're prepared to offer you 3 times your current salary." I blinked. He kept going. "You'll have a team. Stock options, your own division, retail systems nationwide, and a private office, naturally." The words felt unreal, like lines from someone else's life. For a moment, I wondered if I had misheard him, or if exhaustion had finally pushed me into some optimistic hallucination. But Ryan wasn't finished. Most importantly, he said, lowering his voice slightly, we want to formally acquire every system you've built, every module, every predictive model, every diagnostic tool, not to take credit for it, but to put your name on the patents where it belonged from the beginning. The air left my lungs in a slow, quiet rush. My name, on the patents, for 12 years. I'd watched others present my work, polish it, attach their titles to it like decorative badges. I'd convinced myself that recognition wasn't important, that stability mattered more. But hearing those words now, spoken with respect rather than obligation, I realized how deeply I had buried the part of me that once believed my work had worth. I managed to breathe out a shaky laugh. You're offering a lot for one guy. Ryan shook his head. We're offering what you deserve. And truthfully, we're still getting the better deal. Warmth spread through me, then not pride, not triumph, but something quieter and far more precious, the feeling of being seen, really seen, not as a cog, not as a replaceable back-office technician, but as the architect of something valuable. As dinner went on, the conversation flowed easily. Carrying pieces of myself, I thought I had lost somewhere between late-night server fixes and forgotten credit, walking out of the restaurant that night. The cool air hit my face, and for the first time in years, I felt something rise inside me that I had almost forgotten existed. Self-respect. Walking into Leon Mercer's office the next morning felt strangely peaceful, like stepping into the eye of a storm I had already survived. The glass tower above me buzzed with its usual artificial confidence, but for the first time in 12 years, it didn't touch me. I carried nothing but a single envelope, my resignation, and a calmness that felt almost luxurious. Leon didn't look up at first. He kept typing, probably drafting another email full of buzzwords he didn't understand. When he finally lifted his head, annoyance flickered across his face. What now? Ethan, I placed the envelope on his desk with the same care one might use setting down a glass of water. My resignation. He blinked, then gave a short, amused snort, a little dramatic. Don't you think where's a 50-year-old systems guy going to go in this market? He leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. You've aged out of the race, Ethan. Be practical. It was almost funny how calmly the truth rolled off my tongue. I'm joining Nordbridge. The smirk vanished so fast I almost admired his efficiency. His face drained of color, his posture snapped upright, and his fingers curled against the armrests. For the first time since I'd known him, Leon Mercer looked genuinely afraid. Nordbridge, he stammered. You're going to a competitor. That's not allowed. HR will take care of it. As if summoned, HR's representative, Megan, knocked and stepped inside holding a thick stack of papers. She slid them onto the desk. Your non-compete, Ethan, standard procedure. I opened the packet and skimmed the first page, then I tapped the date at the top. This says it's an updated policy from 2018. Yes, she said briskly. All employees are bound by it. I raised an eyebrow. Interesting, because my employment contract is from 2011. And funny thing, there's no non-compete in it. Leon shot her a look that could have cracked glass. Megan flipped to the signature page, her confidence evaporating as quickly as his smirk had earlier. He's right, she whispered. I closed the packet and slid it back toward them. I won't be signing anything new today. Leon stood abruptly, pacing behind his desk like a man searching for a hidden escape hatch. You don't understand what you're doing. Ethan. Nordbridge's this could hurt BrightMart? There it is, I said softly. The first honest sentence you've ever said to me? He froze. I smiled light. Polite, just a hint of edge. BrightMart will be fine. Leon. It always says it will be. But the truth was written all over his face. For the first time ever, he knew it wouldn't be fine at all. Freedom doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up quietly like the soft hum of a new office, or the sunlight spilling across a desk that finally belongs to you. My first morning at Nordbridge felt exactly like that. Calm, bright, possible. I walked into my new workspace with the same notebook I'd carried for a decade. But for the first time, the weight of it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like proof that I had something worth building. Ryan introduced me to my team, 5 engineers handpicked for curiosity, not seniority. They shook my hand, excited, respectful, eager to learn. No ego, no hidden resentment, no one fighting for credit. It was surreal. For 12 years. I'd been the quiet foundation holding up a company that barely remembered my name. Now, suddenly, people were looking at me the way I used to look at mentors, like someone who could teach them to build entire worlds. We dove into work immediately. I opened the documentation for the new architecture and wrote Ward Suite across the top. Seeing my own name there printed, bold, unchallenged, stirred something warm inside my chest. Pride, the kind that had been dormant for too many years. We rebuilt the predictive modules, redesigned the load balancing layers, upgraded the diagnostic engine. My team asked questions, challenged ideas, improved others. Collaboration, not competition. It felt like relearning how to breathe. 3 weeks later, Ward Suite went live in its first pilot store. Performance metrics came in almost instantly, inventory accuracy up 30%, processing speed doubled, error rates cut in half. My team cheered, and Ryan clapped me on the back with a grin that looked like victory. But the shockwave didn't hit until the next morning. Ryan burst into my office, breathless. "You need to hear this call." He put it on speaker. A calm, authoritative voice came through. "This is Elise from Harper & Wells. We'd like to discuss migrating our entire operations to your new system." I froze. Harper & Wells wasn't just any client, it was BrightMart's crown jewel. The contract Leon bragged about in every board meeting. "May I ask?" Ryan said smoothly. "What prompted this interest?" There was a brief pause, then Elise replied with surgical precision. "We want to work with the person who created the system, not the one who stole the credit." My stomach flipped. My team stared at the speaker, then at me. For years, Harper & Wells executives had shaken Leon's hand, thanked him for his vision, praised BrightMart's innovation. Now they wanted me, not the company, not the brand, not the illusion. Me. The deal moved quickly. Too quickly. Within a week. Harper & Wells requested a full transition plan. Within 2, they publicly announced their intention to shift away from BrightMart entirely. Industry news exploded. Analysts questioned BrightMart's stability. Their stock wobbled, and their revenue, especially the part built on my old system, began plummeting like someone had cut the cables holding it up. Standing in my new office, watching those headlines scroll across my screen, I felt something powerful settle inside me. Not revenge, not triumph, freedom, and the unmistakable feeling of rising finally, undeniably on my own terms. I left the Nordbridge building that afternoon feeling lighter than I had in years. Ward Suite was stabilizing across multiple pilot stores. My team was thriving, and Harper & Wells had officially begun their transition for the first time since I started my career. I felt like my work belonged to me, and that simple truth set something free inside my chest. I stepped into the parking garage, fishing for my keys, when movement near my car made me stop. A figure stood in the half-shadow, shoulders tight, hands restless. At first, I thought it was a delivery worker or someone lost, but then he stepped into the light. Leon Mercer, my former CEO, my former captor, in a professional sense. A man who had never once come to see me in 12 years of employment, now waiting for me like a ghost that couldn't rest. Several Nordbridge employees stood nearby, frozen mid-conversation, watching with wide, curious eyes, even from a distance. I felt the tension rolling off them. They knew who he was. They knew this wasn't a friendly visit. Leon took a shaky breath. "Ethan, we need to talk." I didn't walk faster or slower. I simply approached him with the same calm I used when debugging a failing system at 3 a.m. "I don't think we do," I said quietly. He swallowed. You're killing BrightMart." His voice cracked, raw and stripped of the smug confidence he used to wear like a tailored suit. "You're killing the company." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the absurdity. For years, I had been invisible to this man. Now he stood trembling in a parking garage, surrounded by strangers, begging me like I held the detonator. "You think I'm killing your company?" I asked, my voice as steady as the engine of a well-built machine. "No, Leon, I saved your company for 12 years. His jaw tightened. "Ethan, please." But I didn't let him finish. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't show anger. I simply told the truth. You only needed 12 minutes to laugh in my face to destroy everything you had. The words landed like a silent punch. Leon staggered not physically, but emotionally, his posture collapsing inward as if something heavy had been ripped from his spine. A few Nordbridge employees gasped quietly. Someone whispered, "Wow." Leon opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape or maybe a witness who might save him from himself. There wasn't one. You made that choice. I continued calmly. You dismissed the person who built your entire system and expected the foundation to hold. That's not my failure. That's yours. For a long moment, the only sound in the garage was the distant hum of traffic. Leon finally stepped back, a defeated shadow of the man who once laughed at my request for fairness. I unlocked my car, pulled the door open, and said one last thing not to wound him. But because it was true, BrightMart isn't collapsing because of me. It's collapsing because you never learned how to value the people who held it together. Then I drove away, leaving him standing under the flickering lights, small, shaken, and finally facing the consequences he built with his own hands. I thought Leon showing up in the Nordbridge parking garage would be the last desperate stunt he pulled, but I underestimated his talent for dramatic downfalls. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. BrightMart was suing me for theft of intellectual property. Theft of the very systems I wrote in my kitchen, on my own laptop, fueled by instant coffee and nights my family barely saw me. For a minute, I just stared at the envelope and let out a slow breath. Not anger, not fear, just a tired kind of amusement. It figured after all those years ignoring my work, BrightMart finally wanted to claim something. Too bad it was the wrong thing. Nordbridge's legal team moved quickly. They gathered documentation, timestamps, repository logs, and my old notebook. I sat in the conference room with our attorneys, flipping through years of my handwriting instead of feeling violated. I felt oddly proud. Every algorithm, every fix, every optimization, my signature was everywhere. The courtroom was cold the morning of the hearing, but I walked in with a confidence I couldn't have imagined a month earlier. Leon sat across the aisle with his legal team, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. His tension filled the room. BrightMart's attorney began with a rehearsed argument about corporate espionage and misappropriated technology. I listened politely, hands folded, feeling none of the panic they probably expected. Then the judge asked the question that cracked their case wide open. Has BrightMart provided evidence of ownership transfer for these systems? BrightMart's attorney stuttered something about internal usage implying ownership. The judge wasn't impressed. Evidence, counsel, not implication. At that moment, Nordbridge's attorney stood, "Your Honor, we request extraction of internal emails from BrightMart's servers, specifically correspondence between Mr. Ward and CEO Leon Mercer regarding intellectual property acquisition." The judge approved the order, and that's when the fireworks started. 2 days later, in the middle of the follow-up hearing, the clerk delivered a printed stack of emails straight from BrightMart's server logs. I watched the color drain from Leon's face long before the judge finished reading the first one aloud. It was an email from 6 years earlier, my email asking if BrightMart wanted to formally acquire the IP for the system I developed at home. Leon's response, read slowly and clearly by the judge. Just use it. We'll sort it out later. No contract, no agreement, no follow-up. Just 6 words that detonated the entire lawsuit. The courtroom went silent. Even BrightMart's attorney looked stunned, flipping through pages as if hoping a different reality might magically appear. Nordbridge's attorney spoke calmly. "Your Honor, this proves Mr. Ward offered the company legal rights, and BrightMart knowingly declined." The judge didn't deliberate long. Case dismissed. BrightMart acted without due diligence and has no legal claim. I exhaled a long, steady release I didn't realize I'd been holding on to for years. The next morning, headlines exploded across the industry. BrightMart loses IP lawsuit. CEO chose not to buy systems, and for the first time since leaving that glass prison, I felt completely, undeniably free. BrightMart's collapse didn't hit me the way I expected. There was no rush of triumph, no sense of revenge completed, just a heavy ache that settled deep in my chest. The announcement came on a Wednesday morning: bankruptcy filed, operations halted, more than 200 employees laid off. I stared at the headline, knowing every number represented someone's mortgage, someone's kid waiting at home, and even though I hadn't caused the fall, I felt its weight anyway. 3 days later, Marlene, former customer service manager, one of the kindest people I'd ever worked with, showed up in the Nordbridge lobby. Her eyes were tired, her voice scraped thin. She didn't waste time on greetings. Was it worth it? Ethan, she asked, not angry, not cruel, just hurt. Her question hung in the air like a verdict I hadn't prepared for. I invited her to my office, but the truth followed me down the hallway I didn't know how to answer. That night I lay awake long after the apartment went still. Every decision I'd made replayed itself in slow motion: the laughter in Leon's office, the erased credit, the exhaustion I carried for more than a decade. I reminded myself I hadn't chosen BrightMart's downfall, only my own dignity, but the distinction didn't quiet the guilt humming inside me. I kept imagining the people I once worked beside, packing cardboard boxes, wondering how everything collapsed so fast. By the fourth night, staring at the ceiling wasn't enough. I needed to do something, not to fix BrightMart, but to lift the people buried beneath it. The next morning, I walked into Ryan's office with a proposal I'd written sometime between midnight and dawn: Bridgeback, a Nordbridge initiative to recruit, retrain, and place former BrightMart employees. Ryan raised an eyebrow as he read it, then leaned back with a slow exhale. You want to pick up their people, he said. All of them? I don't want to save BrightMart, I said, but I don't want to abandon the people who kept it alive. The words surprised even me. They weren't strategic. They were human. Ryan studied me for a long moment before nodding. Draft the full plan. He said, I'll take it to the board. That afternoon I wrote until my hand cramped: training programs, placement partnerships, part-time consulting paths for older employees, every detail crafted to help people land on their feet instead of on the street. The board approved Bridgeback unanimously the next week. News outlets caught wind immediately, calling it everything from industry reshaping to an act of corporate mercy. I didn't care about the headlines. What stayed with me were the messages colleagues thanking me, people I knew saying the program gave them a second chance, and inside that wave of voices, the guilt loosened its grip. I finally understood that sometimes the human thing we can do is help others rise from a fall we didn't cause. The night of the Retail Tech Innovation Awards felt surreal from the moment I stepped into the hall. A sea of lights, polished floors, and familiar industry faces filled the space. But for once, I didn't feel like a ghost drifting along the walls. I felt present, anchored, like someone who had finally earned the right to stand in the center instead of the sidelines. When my name was called, the applause hit me like a wave. I walked onto the stage under the bright white lights, the kind that used to make me shrink. This time, I stood taller. The presenter handed me the award, solid, heavy, real, and said, for redefining the future of retail systems. I heard my team cheering somewhere in the crowd, and then I saw something that nearly stole my breath. Several former BrightMart employees, people I had worked beside for years, stood up, not out of obligation, not out of pity, out of pride. Pride for me, for themselves, for the fact that none of us were invisible anymore after the ceremony. I drove home in quiet awe. It wasn't triumph that filled me. It was something steadier, warmer, a sense that the long, painful climb had finally leveled out into something like peace. When I reached my apartment, a small package sat outside my door. No return label. Inside was a framed article from a business journal: BrightMart's Collapse: The Cost of Ignoring Talent. Tucked behind the frame was a handwritten note. You were never replaceable. Leon Mercer. For a moment, I just held it, this strange, soft attempt at redemption from the man who once laughed me into silence. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt closure. True, quiet closure. I set the frame on my windowsill and looked out at the city, alive, moving, uncaring, and yet full of possibility. For the first time in 12 years, my chest felt light. This was freedom. Not revenge, not victory. Freedom, yeah, and the lesson. Sometimes the world won't see your worth until you walk away from the place determined to bury it. You owe yourself the chance to be valued honestly. If this story resonates with you, feel free to like, share, or leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. And if you'd like to follow the next story, I'd be grateful if you subscribed. Your support keeps these stories alive.